The first thing I noticed was that none of them looked up when we stepped into the clearing. Not right away. I said afternoon, and one of them nodded before I even finished the word. Another one said, "You're a little later than usual." Calm, like we'd been talking. I stopped walking. My partner, Ellis, took another step forward, hand resting near his radio, but not on it. "Game wardens," he said. "Routine check." They didn't ask for badges. They didn't ask why. The man closest to the fire just said, "Of course." Like they'd been expecting us. There were 4 of them, sitting, standing, positioned around the camp like they'd arranged themselves that way on purpose. No one shifted when we came in. No one reached for anything. There was no tension. That should have felt good. It didn't. One of them answered a question Ellis hadn't finished asking. "Just passing through," he said, already looking at me. I hadn't said where from yet. And I remember thinking, not clearly, just a small, quiet thought that didn't sit right. That they weren't reacting to us. They were already adjusted to us. I shifted a step to my left, and every one of them adjusted in a little micro movement with me. Not all at once, not obvious, but just enough. One turned his shoulders a few degrees, another leaned back slightly. The one by the fire tilted his head, all keeping me centered, like they'd done it before. Ellis started the usual questions, names, how long they'd been out, what they were doing this far off the marked trails. Every answer that they gave landed clean. Too clean. "Just hiking," one said. "Couple days," another added. "We came in from the south side," a third said, and then paused, like he'd said a little too much, but not enough to matter. I walked to the edge of the clearing while Ellis kept them talking. The camp didn't make sense. There was no food out, not even sealed packs. No wrappers, no scraps, no cooler, no smell. No personal gear scattered around, no jackets tossed aside, no boots kicked off. Everything was packed or placed. Tents were up, but tight. No sag, no signs of being used. Sleeping bags inside looked rolled, not slept in. Even the fire was neat. Too centered, too open. I looked at the ground. No real wear pattern. No movement tracks between spots. No foot traffic worn into the dirt. People had been there, but they hadn't lived there. I turned back toward them. They were all watching Ellis. Not casually. They were tracking him. "You guys usually come through earlier, right?" one of them said. Ellis paused. "Sometimes." The man nodded like that confirmed something. "We didn't expect you from that direction," another added, glancing toward the trees behind us. Ellis gave a short laugh. "We mix it up." "Sure," the first guy said. No reaction, no surprise, just acknowledgement. I stepped closer. "How long you been out here?" "Since yesterday," he said. "Didn't see any other patrols?" "No." He didn't hesitate, didn't think, he just answered. I said, "Road in from the east is washed out." He shook his head slightly. "Not all the way. There's a pass about a half a mile before the bend." I hadn't mentioned where the washout was. Ellis looked at me. I didn't say anything. Another one spoke. "That north trail has been quiet too, hasn't it?" Ellis frowned. "Why would you know that?" The guy shrugged. Just seems that way." Just seems. But they were stacking details, patterns, patrol timing, entry routes, gaps. They knew the system, and they weren't even trying to hide it. I crouched near the fire. It wasn't for cooking. There was no grate, no stones arranged for pots, no char from food, no smell of anything burned except clean wood. And it wasn't cold enough to even need it. The flame was steady, fed just enough to keep a consistent burn. I nudged a piece of bark near the edge of the pit with my boot. Something black shifted under it. Not charcoal, but rubber. Thin strips, jagged, like they'd been cut off of a tire. A few more pieces were stacked just outside the ring, close enough to grab, not close enough to burn by accident. Not fuel, not trash either, just ready. "What are these for?" I asked to the group as I looked up at them. "Just some trash we picked up on the way in. Want to leave the place better than we found it," one replied. But the delivery was too perfect. I stood up and stepped back. From 10 yards out, the smoke column was perfect. Straight, visible, rising clean through a gap in the canopy. From further out, it would stand out. I turned slowly, lining up sight lines. There was a corridor through the trees. Not natural, cleared just enough to keep the smoke visible from a distance, but still look untouched up close. I followed that line with my eyes. It pointed straight toward the ridge trail, the main approach. Anyone coming in from that direction would see it. Ellis was still talking. I barely heard him. All I could think was, this fire wasn't for them. Near one of the tents, something caught my eye. Not obvious, just a fold in the dirt that didn't match the rest. I stepped closer, a boot scuff, then another, then a faint line like something had been dragged lightly and then brushed over. I knelt and brushed it back. There were marks. Not random. Angles, intersections. I looked up. "Ellis," I said. He glanced over. One of the campers spoke before I could continue. "Just the ground settling," he said. I ignored him. I reached toward the edge of the pack, not opening it, just shifting it slightly. A corner of paper showed, folded. The man closest to me watched my hand, but didn't move. Didn't stop me. He didn't even tense. I didn't pull it out. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough. Lines, routes, positions. I stood up slowly. They were all watching me now. Not defensive, not worried, just waiting to see what I'd do next. Ellis wrapped it up. No violations. Nothing we could cite. Nothing we could legally hold them on. "All right," he said. "Well, you're good to stay. Just be mindful of fire safety." "Of course," one of them said. Too perfectly, again. We started backing out. No one moved to pack up. No one shifted position. They stayed exactly where they were. As we reached the tree line, one of them called out, "You heading back the same way?" Ellis turned slightly. "Why?" The man shrugged. "Just wondering." Not casual, not curious, just checking. Ellis gave a non-answer and we kept walking. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. All four of them tracking us until we were out of sight. We didn't speak until we were back in the truck. Doors shut, engine on. Ellis sat there for a second and then said, "That was off." I nodded. He looked at me. "What'd you see?" I took a breath. "That wasn't a campsite," I said. He waited. "You see the rubber by the fire?" I said, "Yeah, that fire was a signal. Clear line of sight to the ridge. They weren't cooking. They weren't staying. Everything was positioned outward." Ellis's jaw tightened. "They knew patrol patterns," I added. "Routes, gaps, timing." He stared ahead. "And the map?" I didn't even need to open it. Ground markings matched the trails, access points, choke spots. Ellis leaned back. "They weren't camping," he said quietly, and I nodded. "They were waiting," I said, "to see who showed up." Neither of us said anything after that. We just drove. Later that afternoon, dispatch called. Another unit had been heading out to a flagged area, possible poaching activity, fresh reports. They got there, and there was nothing. No gear, no carcasses, no camps. Just cleared ground and tire tracks heading out. Ellis looked at me as the radio went quiet. I didn't say anything. Didn't have to. That clearing that we'd walked into earlier with the campers, it sat right along the approach to that site. Right where anyone coming in would pass. Right where a clean column of smoke would be impossible to miss. We didn't interrupt anything. I think we triggered it. And whoever those people were, they weren't surprised to see us. They were there to make sure they did.